Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to look at creating some other graphs with the data and actually building our frequency distributions from the data. So what I've done here is I've gotten our text message data together. And what I want to do from the text message data is build from it our frequency distribution. Now, if we remember, we had to set class widths and class boundaries, so we're going to let the formulas do this for us. And so the class width formula was the number of the range divided by the number of classes we wanted rounded up. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make some space for things, and I'm just going to say class width. I like doing things down in the data section. I tend to leave the top for headers for columns of data, and then anything I have that. And so we're gonna create a formula for this. Let's create the formula in pieces. We'll do the range and the class width. And so the range is the minimum value, or the max value minus the minimum value. And so I have 50 pieces of data, 50 text messages, and so my range is going to be max A2 to A50 minus min A2 to A51. Actually, let me fix that over here. This should be A2 to A51. Oops. Retype that in. That happens. So this is going to be the max A2 to A51 minus the min of A2 to A51. And there we go. And so our range of data is 133. I want to make sure. And now our class width is the range divided by the number of bins we're going to put it in, rounded up. And so we're going to choose the round up function, which will round up for us. Oops. And then we're going to take the range, which is cell D2, and we're going to divide it by how many bins we want. And I'm only going to do 5 bins. Oops, what did I? Oh, I did it. Divided by 5, comma, and we're going to round up to a digit. Oh. There we go. 0 digits, 0 decimal places. And so our class width is going to be 27. And so we're letting Excel do all the formulation and calculation for us. Sorry about the typo there. Right? And so we rounded up to 0 decimal places. We did our range divided by 5 bins. And so now what we need to do is we need to build the lower and upper class boundaries that we had. So I'm just going to make a lower class boundary. I'll just call it LCB. And upper class boundary, UCB. And we're going to have 5 of these. And so the first one is going to equal the minimum of our data set, A2 to A51. And so the minimum value goes into the first one. Well, remember when we did the class widths, the lower boundaries increased by when we did the classes, the lower boundaries increased by the class width. So what I need is this one, which is F 3 plus this one, D3. But D3 is not going to change, so I'm going to anchor it with the dollar signs. Right? The class width is always going to be the same. And so, remember, I want 5 of these. So, there's 3, 4, and 5. And I now have all of my lower class boundaries. And so if you go back to the steps you do for making a frequency distribution, here Excel is doing it for us. It's doing the class boundaries for us. And in this case, we don't have to worry about keeping the edges together. Now, remember, for the upper class boundary, it was this one minus 1. And there our first class is done for us. Okay. So we're using these formulas to make things for us. And so again, it was F4 minus 1. Now this is going to be G3 plus my class width again. But remember, the class width doesn't change. Whoops. The right one here again. So I need to put dollar signs if I can type right today. Today is not my best typing day. And now I bring it down to there. And I've now created a space for my frequency distribution table. And so instead of having to calculate these all by hand, we just have to make sure that we put the minimum value there and add the class width to it. And then in dragging that down will get us every piece. And then for here, it's this column, this value minus 1. And then we drag everything down also. And so we've created the ability to make frequency histogram. And so now what we need to do is we need to count how often the number appears in our data set. All right, now we're going to enter a formula that's going to count the frequency for us. And I might typo this a bit odd, but we'll look at this special formula here. It's got some special symbols. So we're going to type in equal count if S. And it means we have a set of conditions. So I'm going to put my data in here. Now, because we're going to copy this, I need to dollar my A, $2 to dollar A, $51. Whoops, 51. All right, and so I'm going to need to say, hey, I'm keeping track of this range of data, and we're holding it in its place. And then I want to tell it the condition that I have on it. And the condition I have on it is a comma. I'm going to put a quotation mark, and I need to be greater than or equal to the value that's in F3. So I have to put an and sign, which is shift 7, F3. Now notice I didn't put any dollar on F3, because when I copy this, it will update it for me. And then that gets me, if it's bigger than my lower class bound, I also need it if it is less than my upper class bound, less than or equal to my upper class bound. So I put another condition on it, and this condition is formed in the same way. I'm going to choose A, $2 to A, $51, $1 in there. All right, so the same, I'm anchoring the same data. And then my criteria is it's going to be less than or equal to. And then I have to use the shift 7 and G3. And so there are 25 pieces of data in that range. Now, I'm going to pull this down, and I have all my classes. And so I'm able to do a class diagram or a class table by using this really ugly command, right? But we should see the two conditions there that fill in our frequency diagram. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use this to create some different graphs. Now what we want to do is we want to get the cumulative frequency, right? We want to add up the frequency. So we'll put the cumulative frequency here. And so what the cumulative frequency does is it adds up what came before. So I'm going to equal H3. Now this is going to be equal I3 plus H4. And if we now copy this down, we get the cumulative frequency. And it adds all the way up to it. So notice in a lot of these we get some anchor point, we add something to it, and then we copy that anchor point. That happened over here, and that happens here. But this lets us build the cumulative frequency. So now notice we've done these things from early in chapter 2. We can do cumulative frequency, we can do. And what we're going to be able to do with this is now we should be able to build an ogive. All right, so to create the ogive, I'm going to have to add some space up here because ogives start at 0 and our data doesn't start at 0. If you noticed, there's a quick pause in the video. I'm adding a 0 upper bound with a 0 frequency and a 0 cumulative frequency. It's just a place for keeping that 0 point because ogives have to start at 0. It's not part of our actual frequency distribution, so I've moved everything up and added that 0 point. Now I select column G, and I hold the control key, and I select column I. And these are the two sets of data I'm going to use to build my chart. So I come over, and I'm going to choose scatter, and I want to choose the scatter with lines, which I'm going to use the lines and the dots so that I can see. And there I have my ogive. And I now have the ability to see how the data grows. And if we were to change these to percentages, we could see how it works its way up to 100% of the data. Right? And we'll work on that more as we progress because these things are important for us visualizing our data as well as just manipulating it. And you will need to do this with your parking ticket data, and that's going to be your next project.